I took the blame for Ching-Ching. Ethan's voice was very soft, yet clearly audible in Adrian's office. What did you say? Adrian looked up, his eyes filled with disbelief. He suddenly stood up, walked quickly to Ethan, pressed his hands firmly on his shoulders, and forced him to look into his eyes. Do you know what you're saying? That's hit and run causing serious injury, with a minimum of 3 years in prison. Looking up, a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Of course I know. But you are the best criminal defense lawyer in Jiangcheng. With you, maybe I can get out in a year or two. Besides, Ching-Ching is your niece. She's only 20 years old, the age of a flower, as your fiancé. How can I stand idly by? Hearing this, Adrian's pupils suddenly contracted, and his Adam's apple involuntarily moved. Ethan saw it and knew that he was tempted by his proposal. 3 days ago, after Chloe's hit and run, she returned to the Jiang family immediately, like a frightened deer. She curled up in Adrian's arms. Uncle, save me. And Adrian lowered his head reverently, placing a goodbye kiss on her forehead, afraid that her uncle wouldn't handle everything properly. His voice echoed in the living room, so gentle it was heartbreaking. Only Ethan stood on the second floor watching them, his heart growing cold. He had always thought that Chloe was truly the daughter of Adrian's deceased friend, and that he had adopted her out of responsibility. But it turned out that the relationship between Adrian and Chloe was so dirty. At this moment, Adrian's voice pulled him back to reality. But, Xiaoyu, if you take the blame for her, your legal career will be tarnished. Jiang Jiu stared at the man she had loved for 3 years, lowering her eyelashes after a long time to hide the pain in her eyes. But I am your fiancé, and I want you to be well. As tears fell, Jiang Guyan suddenly hugged him tightly, the force almost suffocating him. His warm lips brushed against her ear, his voice hoarse. Don't worry, I will try my best to get your sentence reduced. When you come out, we will get married. I will spend the rest of my life repaying you for what I owe you. Jiang Jiu leaned on his shoulder, smelling the familiar cedar scent, and smiled silently with bitterness. With Chloe around, what kind of rest of their lives could they have? Thinking of Chloe always squeezing between them on every anniversary, of Adrian always preparing an even more expensive gift for Chloe whenever he bought her a gift, and even of Chloe always knocking on their door when they were intimate, saying, "Uncle, I'm scared and want to hear stories." Ethan composed himself, stepped back from Adrian's embrace, and said jokingly, "If you really feel bad, why not give me $1 billion so I can feel at ease?" Adrian looked troubled. Even as a nationally renowned, gold medal lawyer with law firms all over the world, he couldn't just come up with $1 billion. But just as Ethan thought he would be rejected, Adrian readily agreed, okay, and then smoothly turned around and handed him a check for $1 billion that he had already signed. Ethan looked at the flamboyant signature on the check, his eyes stinging. So, for his precious little niece, he really was willing to give anything. He swallowed the bitterness in his throat, took the check, and walked out of the law firm building. At that moment, Jiang Jiu took a deep breath. The early summer sun stung his eyes, and he raised his hand to hail a taxi to Splendid Apartment. 20 minutes later, Ethan had just walked in the door when his college roommate, Ryan, grabbed him and sat him down on the sofa. "The trial for Chloe's hit-and-run case is in a week. I'll have someone prepare a new identity passport for you. Once my people take you to the airport, you can fly directly to London with your new identity." Ryan looked serious. "But have you really thought it through and decided to give up the Ethan identity? Once you give it up, there's no turning back." Ethan gently turned the ring on his ring finger, a bitter smile on his lips. "Chloe gave herself to Adrian on the day she turned 18. They've been messing around like this for 4 years, longer than she and I have been together." He looked up at Ryan, his eyes filled with emotion. "I've brought up breaking up, but every time she disagrees, saying she can't live without me. This is the only way I can leave." Ryan sighed, still worried. "But Adrian is so shrewd, what if he finds out?" "He won't find out," Ethan interrupted her, his eyes red-rimmed, but his tone calm. He had been busy comforting his little niece these past few days, even forgetting my birthday. "What about your family?" As soon as the words left his mouth, Ryan fell silent. Because Ethan's family was extremely patriarchal, to the point where his only use in his parents' eyes was to marry and pave the way for their youngest son. Ethan chuckled, without bitterness, only relief. They don't treat me as family, and I don't want them either. He turned to look out the window, watching the city where he had lived for 32 years. In 7 days, he would leave here and begin his prison life. And Adrian would never know that this prison disaster was just a carefully designed scheme for him to escape his shell. He would not go to jail for his niece. He wanted to leave here forever, for the rest of his life. Adrian should never think of finding him again, saying goodbye to Ryan. Ethan had just returned home when his phone screen lit up. The name Adrian kept flashing like needles piercing his heart. He stared at it for 2 seconds before answering. "I'm sorry, Xiao Yu." Adrian's voice was tired, with a hint of cautious tenderness. "These past few days have been hectic, and I accidentally missed your birthday. I've booked your favorite French restaurant for tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Will you give me a chance to make it up to you?" Ethan lowered his eyes to the calendar on the coffee table. It had been 2 days since his birthday. No matter how much he made up for it afterward, could it erase the pain of being forgotten? Ethan's eyes welled up. The words of refusal still on his lips, Adrian added, "The trial is in 7 days, just let me celebrate your birthday one last time." Hearing this, Ethan finally agreed. The next evening at exactly 8 o'clock, Ethan had just arrived at the French restaurant when he saw Chloe sitting next to Adrian. Chloe was wearing a bright red dress, extremely dazzling, and Adrian had an apologetic smile on his face. He had been bored to death at home these past few days. Ethan took a deep breath. Clenching his palms tightly, it had been 3 years, and he should have expected this. The first time Adrian celebrated his birthday with her, Chloe had a depressive episode. The entire night, Adrian was on the phone coaxing her to take her medication. The second birthday, Chloe directly spilled red wine on him, ruining his birthday. Last year, Chloe even wore her formal dress to his birthday. Each time Adrian promised it would be the last, and then couldn't do it, repeatedly breaking Chloe's heart. And at this moment, Chloe was also tilting her head, twirling the ends of her hair, commenting that her aunt looked very beautiful today, but green made her look old. Adrian cleared his throat and took out a blue velvet box from his pocket, handing it to Jiang Jiu in front of her. "Happy birthday, Xiaoyu Jiang." Before she could even reach out, Chloe exclaimed, "So pretty, little uncle. I want one too." Adrian hesitated for a moment and actually handed the box to Chloe. Afterwards, he seemed to remember something and quickly apologized to Ethan. "Little fish, I'll give this one to Ching first, and I'll buy you another one next time." Ethan listened, and his heart froze again. This necklace was personally crafted by Adrian using his design drafts, and it's one of a kind in the world. He had been looking forward to it for so long. And now it was given away because of Chloe's coquettishness. "It's okay, give him everything he wants. I don't want anything anymore." With the last words about to be spoken, the fish bit down hard, and Adrian felt a sudden pang of anxiety for no reason. "Xiaoyu, Ching is still young. You don't need to hold it against him." He quickly signaled the waiter to bring up a delicate cake. "This is a cake that Ching spent an afternoon making for you herself. Please forgive him." Chloe apologized with a well-behaved expression. "Little auntie, I'm sorry, make a wish. I won't take your things." Adrian also urged Ethan with his eyes, signaling him to make a wish. Ethan took a deep breath, just walked up to the cake, and before he had time to close his eyes to make a wish, a strong force suddenly grabbed his hair and slammed his face into the cake. Instantly, the sharp blade cut open the skin of his right cheek, and a stinging sensation suddenly exploded. Percent Ethan screamed and raised his face, waving his hands frantically trying to find support. But in the chaos, he only heard Chloe's scream, then the sound of a heavy object falling to the ground, and Adrian's anxious instructions. Ching, her depression is acting up again. Xiaoyu, you wait for the ambulance. I have to take Ching to the hospital immediately." Then there was the sound of hurried footsteps leaving the restaurant, and the waiter hurriedly brought the first aid kit, wiped the cream from his face, and bandaged the wound. He sat there blankly, watching Adrian leave, tears mixed with blood trickling down. His heart was dead silent. He had ignored and discarded the habit he should have gotten used to long ago, and he was also used to always being his second choice. In the hospital ward, 9 stitches were sewn into the wound on the right side of his face. The doctor sighed as he sewed, saying that if the wound had been a centimeter higher, his right eye would have been lost. Ethan wanted to say something, but as soon as he moved his lips, the wound was aggravated, causing a sharp pain. At this moment, Adrian pulled Chloe to apologize. "Xiaoyu, I'll have Qingqing apologize to you, she's young and doesn't understand." Chloe screamed and shook off Adrian's hand. "I won't apologize. You said in the novel that you would always be on my side." Then she ran out of the ward crying. Adrian took 2 steps to chase after her but turned back, pretending to be angry as he explained to Ethan, "Don't mind her, it's better to let her calm down." All night long, Adrian was incredibly attentive, carefully changing his bandages, helping him to the restroom, and softly reading stories when he couldn't sleep. But Ethan noticed that every time there were footsteps in the hallway, he would unconsciously look towards the door. Finally, at 3 in the morning, Adrian couldn't help but say that Qingqing hadn't come home yet. He almost blurted it out subconsciously. "But Adrian, my eyes were almost ruined." "I know Adrian is distracted, but since you're going in anyway, your face doesn't matter anymore." As soon as the words left his mouth, both of them froze. The air in the ward instantly solidified, and Ethan's blood turned cold in an instant, hardly believing his ears. "What did you say?" Adrian then grabbed his head in frustration. Xiaoyu. That's not what I meant. I mean you can get cosmetic surgery after your wound heals, but if Qingqing has a depressive episode, it could be fatal." Just then, his phone rang. "Uncle, I'm scared." Chloe's sobbing voice came through the phone, and Adrian's face changed drastically as he rushed out. He not only forgot about Ethan in the bed, but even forgot his coat. Watching the door slam shut, Ethan felt as if a large hole had been torn in his heart, with cold wind constantly pouring in. Yet he could only clench his palms and comfort himself, telling himself it was okay, just 5 more days, and then he wouldn't care what happened between him and Chloe. As dawn broke, Ethan returned to his apartment from the hospital and began packing up the gifts Adrian had given him. The Venetian glass necklace that had been flown in because he said it was beautiful, every dress in the closet that she had personally chosen, the various legal interpretations she had collected for him. Her sincerity was everywhere in this house, but when he faced her, he couldn't feel her love. Ethan gave a wry smile. He wanted to take care of everything related to him before leaving, but before he could start, Adrian's voice suddenly rang out behind him. "Why are you being discharged early?" "Coming back to take care of some old things." Ethan didn't turn his head, throwing a velvet box into a cardboard box. The copper box hit the edge of the cardboard box and rolled onto the ground, revealing the diamond ring Adrian had given him for his birthday last year. Adrian's pupils shrank, and he quickly stepped forward to pick up the small fish. "This wasn't the ring I gave you before." He pondered for a moment, thinking about yesterday. "It was wrong of me to leave you yesterday, but please, I understand." Percent Ethan interrupted him, his voice terrifyingly calm. "After all, lives are at stake." Percent Adrian keenly noticed his alienation and softened his tone. "Xiaoyu, I know I was wrong. Don't be angry. If you don't like these old things, just throw them away. I'll buy you new ones. I'm taking Qingqing to the auction tonight anyway. Why don't you come with us?" Percent Ethan wanted to refuse, but looking at his stubborn expression, he was afraid that continuing the argument would expose his plan, so he had to nod in agreement. Half an hour later, at the auction, Adrian was almost completely obliging to Chloe, willing to go to any lengths to acquire anything that caught Chloe's eye. Lawyer Jiang truly doted on his niece. "I wish I had such a novel too." Whispers constantly came from all around. Ethan sat quietly next to Adrian. He was the one who had asked to apologize, but now he was like a ghost. It wasn't until the end of the auction that Adrian seemed to suddenly remember his existence. "Sorry, Qingqing rarely comes to these events, so I have to keep an eye on her. Take a look at what she's bid on, and if you like anything, just take it. I'll buy her something else another day." The condescending tone made Ethan feel utterly disheartened, and he suddenly felt that everything was pointless. He got up to leave, and Adrian followed with Chloe. Just as the three of them were leaving the auction house, a middle-aged woman suddenly rushed out, wielding a club and smashing it towards Chloe. "Murderer, my daughter is still in the ICU, and you're here enjoying yourself." Adrian instinctively protected Chloe, but found himself surrounded by a dozen people. Seeing the fists and clubs coming down, Chloe suddenly pointed at Ethan and screamed, "Ethan is the one who hit her. My uncle is a lawyer. He can testify." Ching-ching. Adrian's face changed slightly, and he sternly reprimanded her, but after seeing Chloe's pale face, he hesitated, glanced at Ethan, a struggle flashed in his eyes, and then silently said sorry, before saying to the dozen or so people surrounding them, "I am the defendant's lawyer. I testify that Ethan is the murderer." At that moment, Ethan stood there as if plunged into an ice cellar. "Bitch, go to hell." As the pungent smell of sulfuric acid hit him, he subconsciously looked at Adrian, but he was busy protecting Chloe as she got into the car, not even sparing him a glance. The pain of his flesh being burned by the sulfuric acid suddenly surged, and Jiang Jiu fainted directly from the pain. When he regained consciousness, Ethan was awakened by the pain. He opened his eyes and wanted to scratch the painful area, but Adrian held his shoulder down. His voice was tense. "Don't move. The doctor said that 30% of your back has been corroded by sulfuric acid and requires 3 skin grafting surgeries." He turned his head with difficulty and saw that the man, who was always meticulous, was now wearing wrinkled clothes and had obvious dark circles under his eyes. He gently held Ethan's hand, his voice unbelievably gentle. "I have contacted the best medical team in Switzerland. No matter how much it costs, I will cure you." Ethan could only remember the scene of him protecting Chloe and leaving, abandoning him. So cruel, so ruthless. "Go out." He yanked back his hand from her grip. The sharp pain of the gauze rubbing against the wound made him gasp. Adrian's face stiffened. Just as he was about to speak, the hospital room door was suddenly knocked open, and more than a dozen reporters rushed in with cameras. "Miss Jiang, what explanation do you have for the hit and run? The girl you hit was only 16 years old. How can you attend an auction and enjoy a life of luxury with a clear conscience? The victim's family says you never went to the hospital to apologize. Are you showing no remorse?" The continuous flashing lights were blinding him. "Doctor," security guard Adrian suddenly stood up, pulled the curtain to block Ethan, his voice chilling. "Get out, or all of you will receive a lawyer's letter tomorrow." The reporters were quickly driven away, but Ethan didn't feel a shred of security from being protected. He thought of something and tremblingly opened his phone. The top trending topic was his photo. Hashtag, hit and run driver spends millions on jewelry but refuses to pay for victim's medical expenses. Below the hashtag was a video of Chloe tearfully accusing him. "Ethan is my future little Shin, but I cannot condone his crimes." His nails dug deeply into his palm, and he looked up at Adrian. "You promised to wait until after the trial to release my information." Adrian looked ashamed. "I didn't want to release it. Ching-ching is young and doesn't understand things. I've already criticized him severely. Don't hold it against him this time. Besides, you've already agreed to take the blame. Releasing it sooner is better for the situation. Those victims' families won't bother him. You're only worried about Jiang Ching-ching." Ethan suddenly laughed, tears welling up in his eyes. "What about me? Have you ever thought about what will happen to me? I'll stay with you until the trial is over. And I'll never let you get hurt again," Adrian vowed, but Ethan's heart sank into a frozen lake, chilling him to the bone. He didn't want to hear any more, and he wouldn't believe it anymore. The ward fell silent. Adrian hesitated for a moment. "You haven't eaten all day. I'll go get you something." As soon as he left, the dismissal notice from the law firm arrived. Ethan clenched his phone tightly, his heart heavy. He had originally planned to resign, but he didn't expect it to be in this way. As a universally condemned criminal being fired, not long after, Adrian came back with the kanji. He sat by the bed, scooped up a spoonful, blew on it to cool it down, and fed it to Ethan's mouth. Ethan watched his gentle movements and suddenly started to say something ominous. "What if I want to break up?" Before he could finish, Adrian interrupted him coldly. "That's impossible." In just a moment, his expression changed from icy to gentle again. "Little fish, you've given so much for Ching-ching. How could I possibly give you up?" Besides, she's sitting upright, her eyes full of a lawyer's composure. If you leave me, your path will be even harder in the future. And marrying me is the best choice. Jiang Jiu looked at him intently, as if seeing this man for the first time. After a long, long time, she smiled gently with tears in her eyes. Don't be nervous, I'm just joking. After he finished speaking, he turned his head to look at the lush green leaves outside the window. With each act of tolerance, and each act of hurt, his love for Adrian had long been worn away, leaving only pain. Adrian, the more you try to stop me from leaving this time, the more I want to leave, the more I want to leave you forever. In the week I stayed in the hospital, reporters sneaked into my room 20 times. Adrian was annoyed and finally suggested, Xiaoyu, let me take you back to the villa. The security measures here are not good, which is not conducive to your recovery. Besides, the trial is getting closer and closer, and I have to prepare the materials well to try to get a reduced sentence for you. Ethan raised his eyebrows slightly, with a hint of sarcasm. Ching, will he welcome me? He always remembered the night he got engaged to Adrian. When his luggage was moved into the master bedroom, Chloe cut her wrists. It should have been a sweet night, but all that remained in his memory was a bathtub full of blood, and Adrian pulling his hand and saying that Ching lacked a sense of security. So let's live apart for now. From that day on, she only dared to live in the Jiang family occasionally. Like a mistress who couldn't see the light of day. You are my future wife. You have the right to live there. Jiang's words pulled her out of her memories, and he squeezed her hand soothingly. Ching just can't accept it for a while. It's really not good to recuperate here. He didn't say anything more and followed him back to the Jiang family. As soon as I entered, I was met with Chloe's resentful gaze. Little uncle, why did you bring him back? Chloe stamped her foot, her voice sharp. Having him here will bring danger to my Ching. Adrian feigned anger. He's your future little Shenfang. Show some respect. He was always like this, asking a couple of painless, inconsequential questions. Never even saying a harsh word to Adrian. Chloe, if they didn't make him comfortable, why should he let them have an easy time? He held the mockery in his eyes, a faint smile playing on his lips. Little niece, you really don't welcome me. Should I tell everyone who was really responsible for the hit and run? Chloe's face instantly turned pale, and Adrian also frowned. Younger, Ethan suddenly arched his back, pretending to be in unbearable pain. Adrian immediately lost his composure at the sight, wondering if the wound had reopened. He ignored Chloe's dissatisfaction and carefully helped him into the bedroom. The moment Ethan stepped into the room, he noticed that his favorite navy blue curtains had been replaced with pink lace ones, and his favorite record player was gone, replaced by Chloe's stuffed animals. He wasn't even in prison yet, and Chloe was already staking her claim, and Adrian, who kept saying he loved her, turned a blind eye. He turned his head and was about to ask Adrian when he realized he had gone out some time ago. Outside, Chloe's voice could be heard. Uncle, are you really going to marry her? How is someone of her background worthy of Ching from the Jiang family? Adrian lowered his voice. This is my promise to him. We'll be family soon. Stop being childish. Chloe shook his arm relentlessly. When he goes in, can we still be as good as before? You promised to only love me forever. Her voice was tearful. You vowed to be with me every day and only be good to me. Adrian did not answer. In the room, Ethan couldn't help but hold his breath. After 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds of silence, he heard Adrian's hoarse reply. Okay, I'll do as you wish. Ethan bit his lower lip hard, the taste of iron spreading instantly in his mouth. How ridiculous. Knowing full well Chloe's importance in Adrian's heart, he still expected him to refuse. After the disappointment, his heart still ached faintly. He pulled the quilt over his head, forcing himself to fall asleep. The next morning, a burst of rapid knocking woke her up. Ethan braced himself and opened the door, only to see Chloe standing at the door with breakfast in her hands, a naive and innocent smile on her face. Auntie, it's time for breakfast. Just as Ethan reached out, Chloe suddenly let go, and the scalding porridge instantly splashed onto Ethan's hand, causing a red and swollen patch. The ceramic bowl also fell to the ground, shattering into pieces. Oops, my hand slipped, Chloe said, tilting her head with an innocent smile. Or, should Auntie kneel down and lick it clean? Anyway, once you're in prison, this is probably the only way you'll be able to eat. Why not let Auntie practice first? Jiang Ziyu silently raised his head, his calm and unwavering gaze seemingly stinging Chloe. In an instant, Chloe became sharp, contemptuous, and jealous. Do you really think that taking the blame for me makes you my savior? I can handle things just fine without you, just like in a novel. You're just using this to blackmail him. Ethan watched coldly, thinking to himself, if Chloe knew that the matter of going to jail would still fall on his head, would she still be so smug? While lost in thought, Adrian, hearing the sound of breaking dishes, came upstairs. Chloe instantly changed her expression, turning and throwing herself into his arms. Sobbing, "Uncle, I kindly tried to feed Auntie porridge, but not only did he knock the bowl over, but he also burned my hand." Adrian's gaze shifted between the two of them, finally landing on Chloe's reddened hand. Xiao Qingqing was also doing it out of kindness. "I know you're wronged, but you can't take your anger out on Qingqing's body." Over the past 3 years, Ethan had long grown accustomed to Adrian's favoritism. From the initial heartache and sadness to the numbness and desolation he felt now, he slowly raised his hand, pointing to the top of the corridor. "The law emphasizes that whoever makes the claim must provide the evidence," he said. "I splashed him. The surveillance camera is right there. Adrian, do you dare to look?" Chloe's face changed drastically, and she quickly grabbed Adrian's hand. "Uncle, don't you still need to go to the hospital to get a letter of understanding? Let's go quickly. Don't delay important matters." After speaking, she hurriedly pulled Adrian away, and Adrian, who had just been upholding justice, compromised in an instant. Watching their figures disappear, Jiang Ziyu turned around and returned to the room. After locking the door, he immediately dialed Ryan's number. "Adrian, get the 1 billion check to my foreign account as soon as possible." 3 years, she had given 3 whole years of affection. If she couldn't get love, she always had to get some compensation. After receiving a positive reply, he dialed another number. "Lawyer Zhong, Chloe, I have sent the evidence of the hit-and-run to your email. Appeal immediately after the first instance verdict." His voice was terrifyingly calm. "I will make sure that everyone who should pay the price will not escape." After hanging up the phone, he had just rested for a while when the servant came upstairs to remind him, "Miss Jiang, there is a package outside that needs your signature." Ethan didn't remember ordering anything. He went downstairs in doubt, but unexpectedly, as he walked towards the courier, he suddenly received a heavy blow to the back of his head. In the last moment before falling into darkness, he heard Chloe's cold voice. "Take him to the old place. Don't let anyone find out." Ethan woke up in the glare of the incandescent light, the throbbing pain in the back of his head blurring his vision. He found himself thrown on the ground, a camera set up in front of him. Awake, Chloe stepped out of the shadows in her high heels, her cold fingertips tracing Ethan's left cheek. "This face is indeed beautiful. No wonder it can charm my uncle." Ethan tried to dodge, but the movement aggravated the wound on his back, the pain causing him to break out in a cold sweat. But Chloe suddenly grabbed his chin. "If my uncle saw you under a group of men, would he still want you?" Chloe raised her hand, and several burly men stepped out of the darkness. Ethan endured the pain and pressed the alarm on his watch, looking directly at Chloe. "Aren't you afraid Adrian will find out?" "So what?" Chloe sneered. "He will always believe me." She lowered her voice. "You don't know yet, do you, uncle? He loves me. He can only have one woman by his side. And as for you, just stay in prison and take your time." The men began to tear at Ethan's clothes. When a dirty hand reached under her skirt, he suddenly headbutted the man's nose. Useless. Chloe stepped out from behind the camera, snatched the belt, and whipped Ethan hard, until he gave in. The man took the belt and whipped him again and again. Ethan's struggles gradually weakened. Chloe checked the footage in the camera. "With these photos, let's see what face you have left to marry into the Jiang family." She turned and left, telling them not to kill him, as he was still useful to her. Just as Ethan was about to lose consciousness, the door was kicked open and the police rushed in. He was rushed to the emergency room and was out of danger after 3 hours of rescue. His injuries were very serious, with multiple soft tissue contusions throughout his body. and the wound from the previous sulfuric acid burn was torn again, as Ethan was wheeled out of the operating room. He heard the doctor reporting this to Adrian. Adrian stood by the hospital bed, his fingers hovering in the air before retracting. How could it have turned out like this? You should ask Chloe about that question. Ethan's voice was hoarse, as if he had used all his strength to say these words. But as soon as he finished speaking, Adrian denied it. Impossible. Ching-Ching is pure and kind. She wouldn't do such a thing. You were missing yesterday, and she blamed herself and cried all night. What about the security camera at the entrance? Ethan asked. Adrian pinched the center of his eyebrows. There was a power outage, and nothing was recorded. What a coincidence, Ethan said slowly, each word like a blade scraping his throat. Adrian sighed, reaching out to stroke her face, but withdrew his hand awkwardly after seeing her cold eyes. I've suppressed those videos and photos. They won't be leaked, rest assured. Should I thank you for that? Ethan retorted sarcastically. Jiang Yuyan opened her mouth, feeling uncharacteristically tongue-tied for the first time, unable to respond. The ward was instantly filled with a suffocating silence. Then, he looked at his watch and finally spoke. The court hearing is tomorrow. Jiang Zhiyu's heart sank to the bottom. He should have known it long ago. In his heart, family ties were always the most important thing, even though he was lying in the hospital, battered and bruised. He was still concerned about whether his little niece could be exonerated. Are you afraid I won't be able to appear in court, that no one will take the blame for your niece? His voice trembled, not from pain, but from anger. The main thing is that the chain of evidence is already fixed, and it's too late to change it now. Speaking in a metaphorical way, slowing his tone, but I promise, no matter what you become, I will marry you. Looking at Adrian's affectionate appearance, he suddenly felt extremely disgusted. Okay, he heard himself say, his voice frighteningly calm. Then how about we register for marriage? Today, Adrian was clearly stunned. Given your special physical condition, the Civil Affairs Bureau can provide door-to-door service. It's still possible this afternoon. Ethan looked towards the door. Chloe was standing there, having appeared at some point, her face pale. Uncle. He choked as he changed gears. Adrian's expression instantly became complicated. He looked at Ethan and then at the faltering Chloe, finally saying, as for interrupting directly, or is your promise just talk? Ultimately, under Ethan's gaze, he nodded with difficulty. Okay, I'll arrange it. Chloe let out a sob and turned to run away. Adrian instinctively took 2 steps to chase after her, but stopped abruptly, turning back to force a smile at Ethan. I'll go contact the Civil Affairs Bureau. Ethan watched his departing back, a cold smile forming at the corner of his mouth. At 3 in the afternoon, the staff of the Civil Affairs Bureau arrived at the ward with their equipment. Throughout the entire process, Adrian was absent-minded. Ethan quietly watched as Adrian's phone rang the moment the seal was stamped. Uncle, if you marry him, I'll die for you to see. Chloe's heart-wrenching cries came from the receiver, accompanied by the sound of shattering glass. Adrian almost immediately stopped the procedure. Sorry, the wedding will have to be postponed for now. I have something important to attend to. After saying that, without waiting for anyone to respond, he rushed out of the ward. Ethan stared at the empty doorway, a wry smile on his lips. He had long anticipated this outcome. Tears streamed down, washing over the wounds on his face. The salty sting still couldn't compare to the pain in his heart. He had given Adrian many chances. But he still chose Chloe, and so he wouldn't have a shred of compassion left. He directly dialed the police. I want to report a case regarding Chloe's kidnapping, intentional injury, and attempted rape. I have evidence. The police arrived faster than Ethan had expected. Before 5 o'clock, 2 officers pushed open the door. Ms. Jiang, we received your report. The older officer showed his credentials. Please explain the situation in detail. Jiang Zhiyu laboriously removed her watch and handed it to him. It has recording and video functions. It has been recording since I woke up. His voice was hoarse but unusually firm. The officer took the watch, and Chloe's vicious voice immediately erupted in the ward. If my uncle sees you under a group of men, will he still want you? The officer's face changed drastically, and the younger one's knuckles even turned white on his notepad. We will immediately open a case for investigation." The older officer said in a deep voice, with suppressed anger, "Rest assured, the law will not let any evildor go free." Ethan tugged at the corner of his mouth, his smile pale and sharp. "My lawyer will follow up on this case throughout." He paused, a glint of calculation flashing in his eyes. "But I have a very important trial tomorrow, and I hope the police will not alert the culprit for the time being, because I have more important evidence to add." The officer looked at him deeply and finally nodded. "We will cooperate, but please be sure to stay safe." After the police left, the ward fell into a deathly silence. Ethan slowly turned his head to look out the window, watching the sunset gradually devoured by darkness, just like his heart, which once passionately loved Adrian, was now desolate. The phone screen lit up, and Adrian's message popped up, appearing particularly dazzling. "Ching-Ching's emotions are still unstable. I have to be with her. Can we talk about the wedding later?" Every word was like a knife, stabbing fiercely into his heart and then twisting it violently. Ethan gripped his phone tightly, his knuckles turning white, almost crushing it. There would be no later between them. One day, the courtroom was packed. This farce had already become the talk of the town, and people craned their necks to see what would happen to Ethan. Adrian stood at the defense table in a tailored suit, with dark circles under his eyes, but still gave Ethan a gentle smile. "Don't be afraid, I'm here." "Defendant Ethan, do you plead guilty to the charge of causing serious injury in a traffic accident?" The judge's voice echoed in the courtroom. "I plead guilty," Ethan said in a calm voice, "but my lawyer has a supplementary statement." Adrian immediately presented the plaintiff's letter of understanding and compensation voucher. With his defense, plus Ethan's good attitude of pleading guilty, the sentence was reduced to 2 years. The audience in the gallery immediately erupted in whispers, discussing the lenient sentence. But as the court adjourned, Jiangxi was led to the restroom by the bailiffs. Through the corridor window, he saw Adrian rushing out of the courtroom, his phone pressed tightly to his ear. Looking almost frantic, suddenly, the door of the restroom was burst open, and Adrian rushed in, the bangs on his forehead soaked with sweat. "Young master," his voice trembling, "Ching-Ching has been kidnapped." Ethan slowly turned around, his face unreadable, so it was the victim's younger brother. Adrian grabbed his shoulders, the force making him frown. "He threatened me that if I continued to seek a reduced sentence for you, he would make Ching-Ching suffer the same fate as her sister. He's my family, and I promised her parents I would take good care of her. I can't break my promise." Ethan looked at the familiar face, his heart sinking. "What about me? Are you going to abandon me again?" Adrian was silent for a moment, as if firming up his resolve. "I'm going to change my defense strategy, which may increase the sentence, but I swear, once it's safe, I'll use all my connections to get your sentence reduced. The Jiang family has enough influence in this city." Ethan interrupted him, his voice piercingly cold. "Spare me the predictions. Remember your choice today." Adrian looked at the aloof Ethan, a sense of panic rising in his heart. He wanted to explain further, but was interrupted by the bailiff's knock. After the retrial, Adrian didn't dare to look at Ethan again. Instead, he overturned all his previous defenses and even portrayed Ethan as an incorrigible criminal. With every word he spoke, gasps echoed from the gallery. Ethan listened quietly, the expression on his face frighteningly calm. When the judge asked if he had any final statement, he slowly stood up and stared directly at Adrian's face. "Of course I have nothing to say, but Lawyer Jiang, you better not regret what you said." His expression changed, his Adam's apple bobbed, wanting to say something, but Ethan had already turned away. The judge finally pronounced the sentence. Ethan was sentenced to 5 years in prison for causing serious injury in a traffic accident. As the cold handcuffs snapped onto Ethan's wrists, Adrian rushed over, wanting to say something, but he didn't turn back, simply straightening his back and heading towards the side door of the courthouse. A black van with "Escort" printed on it was parked there, and inside were people arranged by his college roommate, Ryan. The moment the van doors closed, the driver unlocked the cuffs and tossed a backpack to Ethan. Passport, cash, a new phone, and a plane ticket to Switzerland, where someone would meet him. The car started, not heading to the prison, but straight to the airport. On the way, Ethan used his new phone to call his lawyer. Attorney Jong could begin the appeal. His voice was frighteningly calm. "Submit all the evidence I gave you, including the videos of Chloe's kidnapping and intentional injury, to the procuratorate." After hanging up, he handed the old phone to the driver for destruction, and after getting out of the car, he directly carried his suitcase and resolutely walked into the security checkpoint. He hoped that Chloe would enjoy the 5-year sentence and that the habit of telling fables, which she always said she couldn't live without, would no longer have his presence in her life. At an altitude of 10,000 feet, the sunlight pierced through the clouds, illuminating his face. His new life was about to begin. After confirming Chloe's safety, Jiang Yuan hung up the phone, but her palm was wet and cold. He watched the departing escort vehicle, his heart as if clenched by an invisible hand, a huge ominous premonition weighing heavily, as if something vital was disappearing with that vehicle, never to be grasped again. "It's okay, Xiaoyu will understand, he won't blame me," he muttered to himself, as if trying to convince himself. But his fingertips trembled uncontrollably. Just then, a bailiff walked up to him, his voice formal. "Lawyer Jiang, Ethan expressed disagreement with the verdict and has entrusted his agent, Mr. Jong, to file a timely appeal. Please return to the court immediately." Adrian was standing in place, his heart pounding in his chest. He almost floated back to the courtroom, and as soon as he entered, his eyes were fixed on the familiar figure in the defense seat. Attorney Jong, Jiang Zhiyu's agent, was standing steadily in his former position, with an almost dazzlingly friendly and appropriate smile on his face. "Your Honor," Attorney Jong's voice was clear and penetrating. "Firstly, my client, Ms. Ethan, strongly objects to the verdict in this traffic accident case. She has provided me with new, irrefutable evidence that someone else was responsible for the hit and run." Secondly, Attorney Jong's gaze turned towards the suddenly pale-faced Adrian, and his voice turned abruptly cold. "My client is formally filing a criminal and civil lawsuit against Attorney Jiang Yuan and your niece, Miss Chloe, accusing Miss Chloe of serious crimes including kidnapping, intentional injury, and attempted assault against my client." The entire courtroom fell silent instantly. The next second, the flashes from the press box went off like crazy, and the discussions in the audience surged like a tide. Adrian's face drained of all color in that instant. Turning pale, he suddenly stood up, almost spitting out a roar from between his teeth. Absurd. This was a blatant slander. Slander. A cold arc appeared at the corner of Attorney Jong's mouth, his eyes as sharp as knives, and he asked the judge and jurors to take note. He no longer looked at Adrian, he directly presented the evidence in his hand. Detailed reports, clear bank statements, shocking photos, and even several key video clips in an orderly manner. Ironclad evidence, how Chloe instructed the kidnappers, how she transferred money through secret accounts, and how she took Ethan's private photos and spread them all over the internet. One by one, piece by piece, they were passed into the hands of the judge and jurors, and displayed on the huge courtroom screen. Jiang Yuan stared at the evidence, her pupils constricting violently, her body shaking uncontrollably. His voice was dry and hoarse, filled with disbelief. "Impossible. Ching-Ching is usually the most well-behaved and obedient. How could she do such a devilish thing?" He suddenly turned to the direction of the Jong lawyer, his eyes terrifying. "Where is Ethan? I want to see him." Lawyer Jong just looked at Adrian coldly. "My client was unable to attend due to serious injuries. He has fully entrusted me to handle all matters related to this case." The courtroom door opened again, and 2 officers escorted Chloe in. She was dressed in proper civilian clothes, her hair neat and smooth, and her face even had a touch of carefully crafted paleness and fragility, with no trace of the disarray and scars of being kidnapped. As soon as Chloe saw Adrian, she immediately rushed over. Her voice choked with tears, she tightly grasped Adrian's arm, as if clutching at a lifeline. "Uncle, I'm scared." Adrian instinctively hugged her, his hands frantic as he checked her over. But his eyes were filled with doubt. "Where are the people who kidnapped you? Are you hurt anywhere?" Chloe's eyes flickered, not daring to look directly at him, and she could only sob vaguely. "He just scared me. He didn't really hurt me. Silence. The judge's gavel fell heavily, and a stern voice echoed through the courtroom. The chain of evidence was complete and clear, and the facts were unambiguous. The defendant, Chloe. The judge's eyes were like torches as they swept over the shocking evidence. Her voice steady and strong, was found guilty of intentional injury, causing serious harm, kidnapping, obstruction of justice, and instructing others to take the blame. With multiple crimes combined, she was sentenced to 12 years in prison. His gaze turned to the distraught Adrian. The defense attorney, Adrian, knowing that his niece was suspected of serious crimes, not only failed to expose and stop her, but instead shielded her, finding someone to take the blame. His actions constituted the crime of harboring. Moreover, as a lawyer, knowing the law and breaking it, the circumstances were egregious. He was first sentenced to 2 years in prison. His lawyer's license was revoked, he was banned from practicing law for life, and he was fined 50,000 yuan to compensate the plaintiff, Jiang Jiu, for emotional distress. The judge's voice was cold and merciless. Adrian, do you have anything else to say? Adrian stood stiffly in place, his clenched fists turning white. He didn't know when Ethan had started planning all this. Was it when Ching hurt him, or when he forgot his birthday, or even earlier? But it was useless to say all this now. It was meaningless. He heard his own dry voice ringing out, hollow and unlike his own. The gavel fell again. Court adjourned. Uncle, save me. I'm only 22 years old. You must have a way, please, uncle. Chloe burst into a heart-wrenching cry, and was ruthlessly lifted up by 2 strong police officers and dragged towards the side door. She struggled desperately, her fingers clawing at the door frame, her tearful eyes turning back to look at Adrian, her eyes full of desperate pleading. Adrian's hands were also pinned back by 2 police officers as he walked towards the prison van. Adrian was released after only 1 night in jail because his father used his connections with the Jiang family to first reduce his crime to a suspended sentence, and then used his years as a lawyer to help the people, ultimately securing his release. The moment he saw the sunlight again, his father slapped him hard. You unfilial son, is this how you disgrace the Jiang family outside? Adrian hung his head in silence. His mother was his father's 3rd wife and died early. He didn't want to get caught up in the family's infighting, so he embarked on the path of becoming a lawyer. And now, I told you long ago that woman was a disaster. Are you satisfied now? Adrian's heart felt empty, as if wind was constantly blowing through it. He never expected that his niece, whom he had doted on for so long, would have such a face behind his back. But Ching's father died for her, and his father saved him from a fire with his life. Thinking of this, his heart softened again. His father must be having a hard time in prison, and he must be terrified after being imprisoned so suddenly. Can you bring him out, even if it's just for a few days? The surrounding air seemed to freeze, and he looked at the son he had once been so proud of with a complex expression. Jiang's father's voice was cold, without a trace of warmth. Adrian's dim eyes instantly ignited a faint glimmer of hope, and he suddenly raised his head. However, Jiang's father's next words were like a bucket of ice water, completely extinguishing the flame he had just ignited. Exchange it for all the Jiang family shares under your name. Jiang's father's tone was firm and unquestionable, and from then on, the Jiang family's business would have nothing to do with you. I will have the assistant transfer 100,000 living expenses to you every month to ensure you have food and clothing. He paused. Even so, you are willing to give up everything for that bastard? When Adrian hung at his side, he clenched his fists so hard that his knuckles turned white and trembled slightly. After a long time, he nodded heavily. Father Jiang flicked his sleeves and turned away abruptly. The next afternoon, Chloe was released on bail for medical treatment on the grounds that she needed emergency hospitalization and was brought to Adrian's presence by Jiang's father's assistant. In just 1 day, Chloe was already pale, her eyes were frightened and scattered, and her hair was messy. Ching. Adrian felt a dull pain in his heart as he looked at her. Uncle, Chloe seemed to have grabbed a life-saving straw and suddenly threw herself into Adrian's arms and cried loudly, I thought you really didn't want me anymore. I'm so scared. Adrian's body stiffened for a moment. But he finally raised his hand and patted her back. "Don't be afraid, I'm here," the assistant reminded Mr. Jiang in a businesslike manner. "The chairman only fought for 3 months, and he must go back when the time is up. Jiang's will not be able to do more." "What?" Chloe's crying stopped abruptly, and she suddenly raised her head from Adrian's arms, her eyes filled with extreme fear and disbelief. She grabbed Jiang Yuyen's sleeve tightly. "3 months, uncle, you're lying to me, right? I don't want to go back. I'd rather die than go back to that hellish place." Adrian watched him in silence, shattering Chloe's last illusion. "Then quickly bring Ethan back." Chloe, as if grasping at the last straw, shook Adrian urgently. "Didn't he promise to take the blame for me? Where is he? Tell him to come back. Tell him to go to jail." Her tone was confident and justified, with a kind of crazed obsession. Hearing Ethan's name, Adrian's expression faltered, and he pushed Chloe away abruptly, his eyes turning cold. "Chloe." His voice suppressed with immense anger and disappointment. "I'm only taking care of you for these 3 months, and that's it." He took a deep breath, each word clear and icy as it fell. "You've done so much to hurt her. This should have been your deserved punishment. I was wrong again and again in indulging you, shielding you. But I can't keep making mistakes." Having said that, he didn't look at Chloe's pale, resentful face anymore, and directly instructed the servants beside him to take her back to her room. For these 3 months, he would try to satisfy her requests as long as they weren't excessive, but he emphasized his tone and looked at her sharply, telling them to keep a close eye on her and not allow her to step out of this villa. After giving the instructions, Adrian left resolutely. Behind him came Chloe's hysterical cries and curses. "Uncle, you can't just leave me like this. You are my only family." Adrian ultimately did not turn back. Ethan had been missing since the day he was taken away. Adrian used every personal connection he could and hired the best private investigators, but it was like a stone sinking into the sea, without a ripple. He could only cling to the last glimmer of hope and come to the law firm where Ethan used to work. Faced with Adrian's inquiry, Ethan's colleagues looked a bit indifferent and distant. He had been fired a long time ago. The very day the hit-and-run incident was exposed, for the sake of the firm's reputation, the director let him go on the spot. "Then where did he go? Did he leave any contact information?" Adrian asked eagerly. My colleague shrugged, his tone indifferent, saying he didn't know. Anyway, Ethan never came to collect his things. The cleaning lady cleared them out, leaving the law firm. Adrian's heart sank to the bottom. He rushed to the bank again, inquiring about the substantial check he had given Ethan. "Mr. Jiang, I'm very sorry." The bank manager maintained professional politeness, but his tone conveyed an unquestionable refusal. "We can only confirm that the funds from this check have been fully remitted. The recipient is an overseas account, but the specific recipient information and the flow of funds involve customer privacy and cross-border financial regulations, so I cannot disclose more information to you." It seemed that the last ray of hope had also been extinguished. Adrian despondently arrived at Ethan's parents' house. Before he even got close, he could hear fierce arguing and cursing coming from inside. "That damned girl ran away without a word, can't get through on the phone, doesn't reply to messages. Does she even care about us 2 old folks? She created such a mess without a word, then just dusted herself off and left, leaving us with the mess. We really raised her for nothing." It was Ethan's mother's shrill, angry voice, interspersed with his father's heavy sighs. Adrian stood outside the door, listening to the resentful cursing, his last bit of strength draining away. It turned out that he hadn't even told his own biological parents where he was going. He left so resolutely, so completely, severing all ties with the past, as if he had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace to be found. Where on earth was he? He just wanted to find him and ask him what was going on. On the other side, in Switzerland, Ethan used the money Adrian gave him to buy a villa with a garden, and then hired several bodyguards to protect his safety. An Eastern face abroad, spending so lavishly, was bound to attract attention. At this moment, Ethan sat in the corner of the library, his fingers rapidly swiping across the tablet, browsing the latest domestic news. 6 of the top 10 trending topics were related to the Jiang family. Jiang Qingqing's bank transfer records exposed. Jinghao of the Jiang Corporation's stock price cliff-like plunge. He flipped through aimlessly until an eye-catching entry caught his eye. Chloe granted medical parole due to severe mental illness. Ethan's sliding finger suddenly stopped in mid-air. The light from the screen reflected on his face, outlining his calm, almost cold expression. After a long while, he let out a chuckle. Adrian, it seems I still underestimated the depth of your affection for Chloe. He unconsciously caressed his back, the hideous wound still aching faintly, the suppressed flames in his eyes sharp and fierce. You think it's over like this? Without the slightest hesitation, he directly dialed a transnational number, his voice calm without a trace of emotion. Is that the chief editor of News Weekly's website? Are you interested in making a deal? He bribed the servants and copied all the surveillance footage from the villa, especially the surveillance video directly facing Chloe's door, and sent it to the reporter. That night, it immediately went viral on social media, with the hashtag shocking ethical drama, claiming that Crown Prince Adrian and his niece Chloe were suspected of having an illicit relationship. Following closely behind was ammunition anonymously provided by Ethan. Purchase records for the same limited edition jewelry bags that Adrian gifted to him and Chloe, photos of Chloe knocking on Adrian's bedroom door late at night in her pajamas, photos of the doting and possessive look in Adrian's eyes, and some old text message exchanges between Chloe and Adrian showing a push and pull dynamic. The public was instantly in an uproar. Holy crap, this is making me physically uncomfortable. No wonder their photos felt weird, they were way too intimate. So it wasn't familial affection, it was adulterous lust. I'm gonna puke. Adrian was engaged to his fiancée while harboring feelings for his niece. No wonder he was sacrificing his fiancée to protect his niece. So this is what was really going on. The Jiang Corporation has once again been thrust into the eye of the storm, its stock price plummeting and its brand image completely collapsing. Adrian was besieged by paparazzi, unable to take a single step out the door. What chilled him even more was that former classmates from law school who had been like brothers, and friends in the legal field who had praised him, were now jumping out to distance themselves, some even kicking him when he was down, revealing unsubstantiated misdeeds from his student days on social media, trying to ride the wave or clear their names. In an instant, everyone was pushing the fallen wall, and he became a rat everyone wanted to beat, nailed to the pillar of shame. To protect its own interests, the Jiang Corporation directly released the equity transfer agreement signed by Adrian, and issued a statement proving that Adrian had left the Jiang family, effective immediately. All Jiang Corporation shares under Mr. Adrian's name have been transferred in accordance with the agreement. His personal actions are not related to the Jiang Corporation in any way. As soon as the statement was released, Jiang Corporation's stock price stopped falling. The Jiang family used his complete sacrifice in exchange for a respite. Jiang Jiu watched all of this, but his heart was calm. Next up was Chloe's turn. He had asked Ryan to find a private investigator in the country to investigate some of Chloe's dirty deeds. In the past, Adrian had protected Chloe and the things she had done were buried deep. Now that Adrian, the big tree, was on the verge of collapse, it was the best time to investigate. The detective was extremely efficient. In just a few days, a detailed report was sent to Ethan. In high school, Chloe had ordered her followers to trap a transfer student in the bathroom simply because she was prettier than her, leaving humiliating scratches on her face with an eyebrow razor and threatening her to drop out of school. He joined the dance club in college, but just because the teacher didn't choose him as the lead dancer, he spread vicious rumors, slandering the teacher's private life as chaotic, which led to the teacher suffering from depression. The school, under pressure from the lecturers, chose collective blindness to these atrocities, trying to smooth things over. Now that his patron has fallen, it's time for reckoning. Very well, expose this evidence along with the interviews the victims are willing to give. Miss Jiang, the detective's voice paused on the other end of the phone, her tone somewhat grave. Besides these, I also dug up something even more shocking about Chloe's background. His so-called benefactor father who sacrificed himself to save Adrian was a complete hoax. Ethan's fingers tightened slightly around the phone. That man was not a heroic figure at all. He was terminally ill and didn't have long to live. Chloe's biological parents, a pair of greedy gamblers, meticulously planned that accident with him. They arranged for the terminally ill man to heroically save him on the only way to the lecture, using a life that was already about to end to get Chloe the opportunity to enter the Jiang family. Shortly after the man died, Chloe directly sent her parents abroad. After that, she gave a large sum of money to the man's family as hush money, and every year after that, she would remit money to her parents' overseas account. A brief silence fell on both ends of the phone, then Ethan chuckled softly. A hint of dampness in the corner of his eyes. If Adrian knew that the Chloe he carefully cherished was just an elaborate hoax, what would his reaction be? Would he regret everything he had done? But no matter what his reaction is now, it is no longer important to him. He will no longer wallow in the past. Soon, new evidence was once again presented on the stage. Adrian looked at the irrefutable evidence and felt a rush of blood welling up in his throat, his vision blurring. The obsession with repaying kindness, which had supported all his efforts, all his sacrifices, and even his willingness to betray his beloved, collapsed in an instant, shattering into dust. The responsibility he had upheld, the protection he had been so proud of, turned out to be a deliberate, utterly filthy deception from beginning to end, and he was the most foolish and pathetic pawn in this deception. Bang! With a grim face, he forcefully pushed open the bedroom door of Chloe. The door panel slamming against the wall with a loud noise, Adrian's chest heaved violently, his eyes bloodshot as he stared at Chloe. Chloe was facing the mirror applying makeup. Startled by the sudden loud noise, her hand trembled, and the comb fell to the ground. She turned back in alarm, her face still bearing a carefully maintained fragility. "Uncle, what are you doing?" Before the words could finish, a sharp gust of wind from a palm had already arrived, a slap with all his might. Carrying all of Adrian's anger at being deceived, the shame of being fooled, and the regret of ruining everything, landed hard and squarely on Chloe's face. The force was so great that she staggered and fell onto the dressing table, sending expensive cosmetic bottles and jars tumbling to the ground in a chaotic mess. Chloe let out a shrill scream, covering her cheeks and looking up in disbelief. The instantly swollen finger marks were clearly visible on his pale face. Jiang Qingqing. Adrian's voice was hoarse, each word laced with venomous hatred and icy despair. "You actually deceived me for a whole decade. Back then, you were just a 12-year-old girl, yet you had such ruthless scheming. I was truly mistaken." He bent down, roughly lifted her up, and forced her to look into his eyes. "Like a fool, I drove away the person who truly loved me to protect a liar like you, and I almost pushed him into hell." Chloe was frightened by his appearance. Her face still burning with pain, he immediately put on that familiar tearful expression, trying to grab Adrian's hand, his voice choked with sobs. "Uncle, listen to me, it's not like that. They forced me. Please forgive me. I know I was wrong. I only have you as my uncle to forgive me," he sneered, his voice cold and piercing, playing the sympathy card. "Put away your disgusting tricks. I've seen enough and had enough. I used to think you just grew up crooked without your parents' care. Turns out you've been a bad seed from the start. I can't take care of you anymore." Adrian stood up, picked up the golf club behind the door, and approached Chloe step by step. "Chloe, it's time for you to atone." Chloe's hands were broken, and her legs were thrown back into prison. This time Adrian didn't take any further action. He even appealed, adding another 3 years to Chloe's sentence. If he could still come out alive, Adrian would throw him on a deserted island to fend for himself. And if he died in prison, he would send him to his biological parents. After dealing with everything, he looked at Zhu Shuai's empty villa and felt a big hole in his heart. The Ethan who had always stood by his side without complaint or regret had been lost by him. He wanted to atone. He wanted to find her back, but Ethan seemed to have disappeared. It wasn't until 6 months later that he saw Ethan's figure on a foreign website. He had become a qualified lawyer. Ethan's name was already well known in the international arbitration community. With his extraordinary intelligence, tenacious will, and keen insight into complex cross-border cases, he quickly gained a foothold in Renault International law firm and became one of its youngest partners. He no longer needed to depend on anyone. In his law office, Yuji was conducting a video conference with clients in London in fluent French, his eyes focused, his words sharp, his aura strong and confident. The meeting ended, and the assistant knocked on the door and came in, informing Jiang that a gentleman was at the lawyer's front desk without an appointment. He insisted on seeing him, saying his surname was Jiang, that he was from China, and that he had been waiting for almost 3 hours. Jiang's fingers, which were flipping through documents, did not pause in the slightest. And he didn't even glance up from the documents. His voice was calm and unwavering as he told him that attorney Jiang's schedule was full and that he did not see unannounced visitors. If he needed legal aid, he should schedule a consultation according to the procedure. Attorney Jiang's assistant responded and withdrew to the law firm lobby. Adrian sat on the cold waiting chair, out of place in this environment full of modern elite atmosphere. His suit was no longer so well-fitting and neat, and his brow was etched with deep fatigue and hardship, and his chin was covered with blue stubble. He was no longer the high-spirited, undefeated, top lawyer. In the past 6 months, he had been abandoned by his family and was notorious in China, and even the law firm he was so proud of could not be maintained. He could only start from the bottom and start a business step by step. The only thought that sustained him during this time was to find Ethan, say sorry to him in person, and beg for a glimmer of forgiveness. When he heard the assistant's formulaic rejection, his heart sank, but he wasn't surprised at all. He stood up and pleaded to the assistant's departing back. "Please, could you please tell him again that my name is Adrian, and I will keep waiting until he is willing to see me." In the following days, Adrian appeared in the lobby of the law firm on time every day, almost becoming a stubborn landscape. He didn't disturb anyone, just used persistence to announce his determination. The law firm's employees went from initial sidelong glances and discussions to later getting used to it. Ethan knew he was there. Countless times, he saw that stubborn and downcast figure through the gaps in the office blinds, and his heart was not without waves. But each time, the ripples of emotion were forcibly suppressed by him. How easy is it to forgive? Those betrayals and hurts had already formed a thick layer of ice in his heart, impossible to melt. It wasn't until a week later, when Ethan finished a lengthy multinational negotiation and passed by DA Tang, that Adrian stood up and quickly greeted him. "Young master," he said cautiously. Ethan stopped, his gaze calmly falling on his face. There was no anger, no resentment, only a detached scrutiny, as if looking at a stranger. He raised his hand to stop Mr. Jiang, the security guard who wanted to step forward and stop him, his voice very calm. "Is there something I can help you with? Your lingering here for many days has already caused some disruption to the normal order of my law firm." The indifferent tone pierced Adrian's shirt like an ice pick, and he took a deep breath, his posture of suppressing the lump in his throat sinking into the dust. "Little fish, I'm sorry. I know these 3 words are too light and worthless to make up for even 1 per 1,000 of my mistake, but I still want to tell you in person." He stared at the eyes that were once full of love, now frozen cold. "I was so wrong. I misjudged people, and I betrayed your deepest affection and trust." His voice began to tremble, his eyes were red, and he tried his best to restrain his surging emotions. "I don't dare to ask for your forgiveness. I only ask you to give me a chance for me to atone for my sins with the rest of my life. Let me do something for you, anything." He lowered his head, waiting for Ethan's judgment. After a long while, Ethan slowly opened his mouth, his voice still calm and without a ripple. "Jiang Yang, I heard your apology, but so what?" These blunt words made Adrian's face even paler. He moved his lips, feeling that all explanations were feeble. "Adrian," Ethan's voice was cold and clear, "you are, after all, a young master of the Jiang family. As long as you are willing to bow your head and submit, your father will not ignore you." He paused, and then continued. "Don't waste your time on me. The harm that Chloe caused me is like scars that need time to heal." His voice was firm. "Let's go our separate ways from now on and never see each other again." As soon as he finished speaking, he didn't give Adrian any chance to react and left resolutely. Adrian stood there, watching Ethan's departing figure, lost and dejected. The next day, that familiar figure was gone from the law firm lobby. Ethan assumed he had given up and stopped paying attention to him. However, for the following month, a simply wrapped but fresh bouquet of flowers appeared on Ethan's desk every morning without fail, sometimes lilies, sometimes sunflowers, never the same. Besides the flowers, there was also a carefully prepared breakfast and a cup of perfectly tempered espresso, her favorite combination. The receptionist, under pressure, carefully explained that lawyer Jiang said you often skip breakfast, so Ethan expressionlessly picked up the flowers and breakfast. Throwing them into the nearby trash can without hesitation, the movements were decisive and neat, without a trace of hesitation or heartache. Later, Adrian somehow found out that he was handling a complex transnational intellectual property infringement case. The opposing party was an established German company with a deep background and a tough style. He stayed up late searching for information, and through his years of experience, he compiled a thick collection of legal analyses and case compilations that he thought might be useful. He anonymously sent it to the law firm, hoping that he could help Ethan. But a few days later, he saw his carefully prepared materials in the trash can at the back door of the law firm. At that moment, he felt his heart was also thrown on the ground, ruthlessly trampled and crushed. After that, every day, he no longer approached Ethan, but just stood far away, greedily capturing his figure. Sometimes he was discussing cases with clients, sometimes he was partying with colleagues. Adrian always saw him at first glance in the crowd. He had become so dazzling, but he had personally pushed him away. 3 months later, he would be facing Hans Müller, the local ace lawyer hired by the German company at great expense. On behalf of the client, Müller was experienced and uncompromising, and the negotiations fell into a difficult tug-of-war. Ethan's steam stayed up for several consecutive nights under immense pressure. Just as things were at a stalemate, a strange turn of events occurred. Müller's assistant suddenly called, stating that regarding the core point of contention raised by your side, the lawyer has decided not to pursue it further. This sudden concession made Ethan smell something unusual, and he used the connections he had accumulated during this period to investigate the truth. Discovering that Müller was actually Adrian's classmate from his time studying in Germany, and Adrian, seeing how hard Ethan was working, had privately pleaded with the other party to show Ethan leniency for the sake of their former friendship. This news completely ignited Ethan's long-suppressed anger. This was more than betrayal, it was the most blatant insult to his character and professional dignity. She grabbed her phone and dialed the number that he had long blacklisted but knew by heart. The call was answered almost immediately. Adrian's voice was filled with unbelievable surprise. "Xiaoyu, is that you?" Ethan's voice, though not loud, was filled with anger. "Adrian, you disgust me." Adrian on the other end of the phone paused, instantly understanding the reason. His face turned as white as a sheet. "Was it about the case? Xiaoyu, I just couldn't bear to see you working so hard. I wanted to help you, help me." Ethan interrupted abruptly, his voice suddenly rising, full of mockery and anger. "Your so-called help is to beg my opponent to go easy on me. You're insulting me again." Adrian was a little panicked. "I didn't mean that, I just hoped to reduce your pressure. I've had enough." Ethan stopped him sternly, his voice trembling with extreme anger. "Speaking of prophecy, you've never really understood me. Maybe you fell in love with me at first sight just because of my appearance and married me, or maybe because I was obedient. The reason you can't let go now is probably just because I'm no longer the one you can manipulate, the one who was devoted to you. And this realization has cured you of your inability to accept my independence and no longer needing you. You keep saying you love me, but you don't understand what I want. What I want is to defeat my opponent fairly in court. Not with your disgusting, rule-trampling help." After a bout of venting, they could only hear each other's breathing. Ethan calmed down and said seriously, "Predictably, we were never a good match, whether in the past or the future. We are no longer possible. Your love and you as a person will only add to my burden. Let's end it here." The phone was hung up crisply, leaving only a cold dial tone. The light in Adrian's eyes dimmed again. But he still didn't want to give up his entrepreneurial career in China just like that. Even if it was damaged, he had nothing to miss. So, he simply rented a small room in a cheap motel across the street from Jiangxiu law firm. He couldn't work as a lawyer anymore. But many law firms would privately look for capable assistants, so he found a small law firm, mainly engaged in document sorting and data work, which was enough to maintain his life when he wasn't busy. He would stand at the door and look out at the gate of Jiangxiu law firm. If he encountered someone causing trouble, he would always be the first to rush up. For example, today, in a lawsuit against a new agent, we won a complete victory. The losing party refused to accept the court's judgment and appealed several times without success. They directly rushed into the law firm with weapons, demanding that Jiangxiu withdraw the lawsuit. Jiangxiu, get out here. If you don't withdraw the lawsuit, I'll die with you. Ethan had no choice but to come out and negotiate with the emotionally distraught losing party, but he didn't expect the losing party to be drunk and completely incapable of normal communication. Upon seeing Ethan, he flew into a rage at the front desk, smashing all the vases. He had a weapon in his hand, and the bodyguards dared not approach rashly, just as the two sides were at a stalemate. The defendant raised his hand and aimed it in Jiangxiu's direction. You bastard, you're the one who bankrupted my company. If I can't live, you have to come with me. After speaking, he bent his finger and pulled the trigger. With a bang, the entire law firm fell silent. Ethan closed his eyes, tensing his body, waiting for the excruciating pain to arrive. However, the expected pain did not come. He suddenly opened his eyes, and a figure fell heavily in front of him. It was Adrian. He looked at Ethan and forced a weak smile, closing his eyes before he could say a word. The bodyguards quickly subdued the assailant, and Adrian was rushed to the emergency room in an ambulance as quickly as possible. Ethan's hands were still trembling slightly, because his hands were covered in blood, all of which had seeped from Adrian's chest. He sat on the cold hallway bench, his back ramrod straight, but his hands were tightly clasped on his knees, his knuckles white from the force. It was a full day and night before Adrian came out of the emergency room and was transferred to the ICU. Ethan changed into sterile clothing and walked into the ward. Seeing Adrian lying weakly on the bed, his brow slightly furrowed, as if enduring some pain, seeming to sense Ethan standing beside him. His eyelids trembled a few times with extreme difficulty, and he slowly opened one eye. His lips were chapped, but he still looked at Ethan and asked, "Are you okay?" An indescribable surge of intense emotion rushed up Ethan's throat, his heart feeling both sore and stinging. He clenched his hands hanging by his sides, using the pain to force himself to calm down. Ethan took a deep breath, his voice deliberately becoming distant. "I'm fine, take care of yourself." His tone was indifferent, revealing no emotion of gratitude, as if he were just concerned about a stranger. The light of expectation in Adrian's eyes dimmed instantly, and he tried to force a smile, but he fell asleep due to the after-effects of excessive blood loss. Walking out of the ward, Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't want to owe anyone a favor, especially a fortune teller. He took out his phone, dialed his assistant's number, and his voice returned to its usual calm. "Issue a statement clarifying the follow-up to the law firm attack. Also, contact the best rehabilitation center in London and transfer Mr. Jiang there once his condition allows. I'll cover all the expenses." After saying this, he paused before continuing, "Once everything is arranged, I don't need any further reports on his affairs." Leaving the hospital, Ethan took on another case and threw himself into the intense work. He was grateful to Adrian, but that would not sway any of his decisions. If Adrian needed help, he would lend a hand, but that was all. During Adrian's month-long hospitalization, Ethan only visited him twice. The first time, he brought a sum of money. Saying it was a thank you fee, Adrian shook his head and didn't accept it. "Younger brother," I said, "I want to do something for you. You can treat my subconscious behavior as atonement. I don't need you to change anything." The second time, he said he wanted to send him back to China, but Adrian still refused. "I'm living well here. If I go back to China and see familiar places without your presence, I'll be reminded of the things I did to hurt you. I'd rather stay by your side." Ethan let him be. Time flies, and soon it's the end of the year. This is Ethan's first time celebrating the Spring Festival abroad, but it's no different from being in China. He is always the neglected one in that family. Even though he has excellent grades and has become a qualified lawyer without relying on family connections, his parents only care about how much commercial value he can bring to the family. Every spring festival, he has no new clothes, no gifts, no blessings. In contrast, the years he spent with Adrian were the happiest times. If Chloe hadn't been constantly interfering, maybe they would have really lived like that forever. Snowflakes fluttered and fell on the streets. Ethan held an umbrella, walking step by step towards his villa. His colleagues didn't have the custom of celebrating the spring festival, so they only bought some frozen dumplings to welcome the new year. When he reached the villa door, he saw a person in a coat standing there. Adrian stood at the door, carrying a lot of dishes in his hand. "Little fish, I'm here to spend the festival with you." Ethan still let Adrian in, not wanting him to die outside in this weather. Because he had just been released from prison and his lips were still extremely pale. I don't know how long he had been standing in the wind and snow. Adrian was busy in the kitchen by himself. And his knife skills were surprisingly proficient. Jiang Jiu leaned against the doorway, his expression unclear. "Xiao Yu, go wait on the sofa, or take a hot shower. I'll be done here soon," Jiang Yuan said without looking up. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then went upstairs. By the time he had finished packing and came downstairs, the table was already filled with food, the aroma of which filled the spacious but cold dining room, dispelling some of the winter chill. Adrian was carefully bringing the last soup to the table, his movements carrying the weakness of a recent recovery and a hint of imperceptible caution. "All done. Come and sit down, eat it while it's hot." He forced a pale smile and handed the chopsticks in his hand to Ethan, his voice a little low and hoarse. Ethan's gaze swept across the table, finally landing on the last soup. Adrian could cook. He had always known how, having learned during his time studying in Germany. When they first got together, Adrian would occasionally show off his culinary skills, but not with the proficiency he displayed today. Because of Chloe's constant complaints and dissatisfaction, he hadn't cooked in a long time. The two sat face to face, silently eating the food in their bowls. After a long while, Adrian picked up a piece of fish and placed it in Ethan's bowl, saying, "Try this, Ethan," seeing that there were no frozen bits on the fish in the dish. The air in the restaurant seemed to grow heavier. Adrian spoke softly, his voice a little pleading. "I know any words of apology from me would be too cheap, and I wouldn't dare hope you could forgive me right away." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "I just hope you can give me a chance to atone. Even if it's just by making you a meal like this." His voice grew softer and softer, but his eyes were full of anticipation for Jiu's answer. Ethan put down his spoon, looked up at him and said prophetically, "That bullet you took for me, I owe you a favor. You're injured, and I'll take responsibility for you until you're fully recovered and discharged from the hospital. I'll cover all the expenses, and I can even pay for your follow-up rehabilitation. But this meal," he stood up. His eyes swept over the dishes on the table. "I've eaten it, it tastes good. But that's all, you don't need to clean up the dishes. Leave after you're done eating. You're not welcome in my villa." After speaking, he turned and went upstairs, while Adrian sat downstairs with his head lowered for a long time. At 12 o'clock, fireworks exploded in the sky, heralding the arrival of the new year. Adrian cleaned up the kitchen and quietly left the villa. He looked up at the dazzling fireworks, tears streaming down his cheeks. He knew that in the new year, Ethan would no longer be by his side. Ethan also stood by the window of the villa, watching Adrian leave. His feelings for Adrian over the past 3 years also turned to ashes in the sound of the fireworks. After the new year, Adrian didn't appear again. Ethan heard from her again during a television interview. With her solid legal foundation and language skills, she found a part-time legal advisor position in a small non-profit organization that provides legal assistance to grassroots immigrants and refugees. "Why did you choose this job with poor conditions and low pay?" Listening to the reporter's questions, Adrian raised his head, his eyes seeming to look through the camera at someone. "Because I am atoning for my sins, and if the help I provide can allow them to obtain their due rights, then the guilt in my heart can be lessened." But, alas, before he could finish speaking, he began to cough violently. The reporter handed him a bottle of water and casually asked, I remember that a year ago, you suffered a chest injury that left serious sequelae. You can't engage in strenuous activity or stay in dirty environments for too long. Why don't you consider changing jobs?" Adrian lowered his head, a bitter smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. Actually, this is all I deserve. Ethan thought he would never cross paths with Adrian again. But unexpectedly, half a month later, Ethan was handling a cross-border labor dispute as the representative lawyer, and the opponent was the public interest organization where Adrian worked. The two briefly met in the hallway outside the mediation court, Adrian standing behind the mediation lawyer. His demeanor was restrained, dressed in bespoke tailoring, with a sharp aura. Adrian, on the other hand, was wearing a faded shirt, holding thick files. Ethan's gaze swept over him without stopping. As if looking at air, Adrian's throat moved, and he finally lowered his head and silently walked into the mediation room. During the mediation, Adrian displayed a more composed professionalism honed by life's trials. If he hadn't been burdened by Chloe, he could have shone even brighter for the country in the decades to come. But it was his choice, and no one could force him. In the end, Ethan won the case. But the labor compensation plan adopted Adrian's core recommendations. Taking advantage of the public interest organization's gratitude towards Adrian, Ethan left directly. In the evening, Ethan left the celebration banquet. And the piercing cold wind made his head spin. Suddenly, a tall figure blocked all the wind and snow and stuffed a warm sweet potato into his arms. Saying it was to warm his hands in the cold weather, Ethan looked up into Adrian's eyes, the alcohol slowing his reaction by half a beat. Adrian took off his own coat and placed it on Ethan's shoulders, asking where his hotel was so he could take him there. The alcohol amplified Ethan's emotions. He forcefully tore off the old coat, which still held Adrian's body heat, from his shoulders, as if discarding a rag, and threw it back at Adrian, the sweet potato in his hand also falling to the ground. "Get away, I don't need your things." His voice carried a hint of anger and annoyance. He shook off Adrian and staggered forward, Adrian having no choice but to follow silently. As he walked to the entrance of the magnificent hotel, Ethan stumbled on the steps and almost fell. Adrian instinctively reached out to support his swaying body. "Little fish, be careful not to touch me." Ethan pushed Adrian away forcefully, staggering back 2 steps to regain his balance. The dizziness from the alcohol made his stomach churn. "Why can't you ever understand what I'm saying? I don't want to see you again." When Jiang Jiu finally looked up, his beautiful eyes were burning with rage. "Every time I see you, I'm reminded of the times I was hurt by you and Chloe. Can you please just stay out of my sight?" The words that had been suppressed in his heart now burst out as emotions. He had maintained his composure for so long, wanting them to have a decent farewell. But the person in front of him was always haunting him. He suddenly raised his hand and rubbed his right cheek hard and roughly. The expensive foundation quickly became mottled and fell off under the rough rubbing, and his right cheek flushed red under the influence of alcohol. But even more shocking than the redness was a hideous scar that was gradually exposed to the light, extending diagonally from the cheekbone almost to the corner of his mouth. The scar was deep pink, slightly raised, and the edges were uneven, like an ugly centipede permanently etched on his right face. Adrian's pupils shrank, his body stiffened, and he stared at the scar, unable to say a word. "See clearly, Adrian." Ethan's voice trembled slightly, as if he wanted to vent all his grievances at this moment. "This is the good niece you protect, leaving a permanent mark on my face." He stepped closer, his eyes extremely cold. "And you said he was ignorant, telling me not to bother with him." Then, he lifted his shirt, revealing a section of his back, which was also covered with uneven scars. "After going abroad, I had 3 skin grafting surgeries to recover to this state." Ethan stared intently at Adrian. "Tell me, how can I forgive you? How can I give you a chance?" Adrian stood there, his body shaking violently. Ethan stood up, composed himself, and looked at him coldly. "Adrian, I will not forgive you. No matter what you do, I will never forgive you." These cold words seemed to be the last straw, and he could no longer support himself. His knees buckled, and he knelt heavily on the steps. The thud of his knees hitting the ground was clearly audible. He hunched over, his hands clutching his face tightly. his shoulders convulsing violently, and a painful sob escaped his throat. He couldn't even utter a word of defense. Ethan looked at the disheveled man, a sense of pleasure finally rising in his heart. He looked at Adrian, who had lost all his energy, and said coldly, "Don't let me see you again, or my bodyguards will take action next time." With that, he wrapped his coat tightly around himself, walked into the hotel without looking back, and left the man kneeling at the door, defeated by pain, forever behind him. Everything that happened that night completely destroyed Adrian's spiritual pillar, like a soulless walking corpse. He lay in a cheap rental house for 3 days in a daze, with a persistent high fever, and the wound on his chest seemed to be aching faintly again. But he was oblivious. He no longer dared to approach Ethan. Only hoping to do something to wash away the guilt, Adrian returned to that non-profit law firm and worked even harder, fighting for back wages for black laborers who had been abused by their employers, and helping single mothers who had been maliciously evicted by their landlords. He took on all the work that didn't belong to him, working day and night, forgetting to eat and sleep. The after-effects of the gunshot wound in his chest recurred repeatedly under the conditions of overwork and poor living. She often coughed so hard that it was heart-wrenching while sorting out case files, and even coughed up phlegm with blood streaks. But he just swallowed a few cheap painkillers and used silence and work to numb himself. Adrian knew his body was slowly collapsing, but he didn't care, and even vaguely hoped that he could die in this situation, which could be considered a relief. Eventually, he fainted in the office and was rushed to the hospital. He had no other relatives or friends abroad, and the only emergency contact was Ethan. In the end, Ethan received a call from the hospital and, after hesitating for a long time, still came to the hospital. "Are you trying to gain my sympathy by making yourself like this?" Ethan's voice betrayed no emotion. Since venting that night, he had regained his composure, although he felt some remorse. It was good to have said everything. Adrian hid herself under the covers. She didn't want Ethan to see her haggard appearance. Silence lingered in the ward for a long time, and Ethan continued, "Go back to China, go back to the Jiang family." This time, Adrian didn't refuse again, but softly said okay. Adrian left without saying a word, only giving the receptionist at Ethan's law firm a small box and asking him to pass it on. Ethan opened it and saw stacks of money, along with a note from Adrian. "Xiaoyu, I'm sorry. This money is all my savings over the years, including the living expenses the Jiang family gave me. There's a total of 2 million, and I've exchanged it all into pounds. You can use it for cosmetic treatments or surgery. As a small compensation from me, I'm sorry. Live well in the future, and I won't bother you again. Goodbye." Adrian returned to the Jiang family, although he had been stripped of his lawyer's license. His father did not intend to give up on him. He sent him to a subsidiary company under Jiang's banner, starting from the bottom and gradually taking over some of the family's minor industries. Ethan made a name for himself in London, but ultimately turned down Renault's warm invitation and resolutely returned home to open his own law firm. But before that, he planned to visit an old friend, Chloe, in prison, inside the prison visitation room. Jiang Jiyu quietly waited as the guard's voice echoed from the end of the corridor. 7524, visitation. The iron door opened, and Chloe walked in, handcuffed. She was much thinner than Ethan remembered, her once arrogant demeanor gone, leaving only a gloomy look in her eyes. When her gaze inadvertently fell upon the person across the glass, it was instantly ignited, turning into disbelief, terror, and a twisted resentment. He almost lunged at the glass, grabbing the microphone. His voice dry and hoarse. "Jiang Jiyu, what are you doing here? To laugh at me?" Jiang Jiyu quietly looked at him, and after a long while, he picked up the microphone and held it to his ear. "I'm just checking in. I wonder if you're getting used to wearing those." Chloe's cheek muscles twitched violently, her fingers gripping the edge of the microphone, turning white. "Shut up. I don't need your fake concern. It's all your fault, if it weren't for you." Jiang Jiyu slightly curved his lips, but his eyes were icy cold. "What does it have to do with me? You're in this situation because you brought it upon yourself. The once haughty Miss Jiang, now reduced to this state. Are you getting used to it?" Chloe's chest heaved violently, the resentment in her eyes almost tangible. don't get too smug. My uncle won't abandon me. He's just temporarily angry, Ethan scoffed. How naive. He stood up, saying each word distinctly. There are still 12 years. I'd like to see if he'll come to save you. With that, he put down the receiver and turned to leave, the hysterical cries of Chloe echoing behind him. Walking out of the prison gate, the sunlight stung Ethan's eyes, and he squinted. He took a deep breath. Feeling as if something heavy had finally been lifted from his shoulders, he wandered aimlessly down the familiar street. Everything that had happened seemed like a lifetime ago. Suddenly, a familiar voice made him turn his head. Not far away stood a man in a dark blue trench coat, looking at him in surprise. Lucas. Jiang Jiu recognized the person in front of him as his senior from university, and also a prominent figure in the school. It really is you. Lucas walked quickly towards me. I thought I saw wrong. Didn't expect it to really be you. I happen to be working on a case here. I heard you were doing very well in London. Why are you back? Ethan was a little embarrassed by his sudden enthusiasm. It's been over a decade since graduation, when you count it, but he still nodded politely. I came back to start my own law firm. It's more comfortable at home. Indeed. Lucas finished speaking and took out his business card from his pocket and handed it to him. Let's get together when you have time. I happen to have some international arbitration cases I'd like to consult you on. Ethan took the business card, and at the moment their fingertips touched, Lucas's ears turned slightly red. If you don't mind, let me treat you to dinner today. Consider it a welcome home meal. Ethan stared at his reddened ears and finally nodded. Lucas booked a Chinese restaurant, which was full of lively atmosphere. I thought you would miss the food from home since you just came back from abroad. Ethan looked at the table full of food, all of which were his favorites. Lucas kept adding dishes to his bowl, very attentive and thoughtful. Senior, Ethan chuckled. You're taking such good care of me. You must be a family-oriented man. Lucas's ears turned red again, and he stammered, without any of the lawyer's eloquence, I haven't gotten married yet. Ethan was stunned, pursed his lips, and didn't know how to continue. Before he could speak, Lucas continued, his cheeks even redder. There's a cinema upstairs. If the lawyer would do me the honor, would you accompany me to a movie? Jiang Jiu looked at the full bowl of food and the flushed cheeks in a daze. He also felt Lucas's feelings, but he only wanted to focus on his career as a lawyer and wasn't considering relationships. As he was thinking about how to refuse, the door was pushed open forcefully. Slamming against the wall with a heavy thud, Ethan turned around and met eyes with a beautiful woman. The woman was a little embarrassed, checked the name of the private room back and forth twice, and quickly apologized. Sorry, I went to the wrong room. What's wrong? A familiar voice sounded behind the woman. Ethan's eyes moved up and met Adrian's. She had returned to her former appearance, only more composed than before. The woman was coquettishly shaking his arm. I got lost coming back from the bathroom, and went to the wrong room. It's okay. He gently took the woman's hand and walked in another direction. Next time, just call me directly. Without greetings or recognition, the two were like strangers. Ethan breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that the woman was Adrian's marriage partner. Standing together, they were quite a match. Lucas' soft call drew him out of his emotions. What's wrong? Are you still unable to forget Adrian? Ethan shook his head. I'm just lamenting the impermanence of life. Lucas nodded blankly, with a naivety that didn't match his age. What about the film studies, Yangtze? He quickly interrupted him. My law firm is not yet built, and I have no time to consider emotional issues for the time being. Lucas was obviously a little disappointed, but quickly recovered and showed a gentle smile. It's okay, I've waited 10 years, and I'm not afraid to keep waiting. If you need any help, don't be polite with me. Jiang Jiu raised his glass and clinked it against Lucas's glass. Suddenly, a cloud of thick smoke drifted in through the crack in the door, and Jiu felt a bad premonition in his heart. He quickly opened the door and found that the restaurant was already a sea of fire. People in the private room were constantly rushing towards the door, only to find that the door had been locked long ago. This was arson, wasn't it? The front and back doors were locked. How were they supposed to get out? His child was about to faint. The entire lobby was in chaos. The fire was getting bigger and bigger, and there were screams everywhere. A small pleasure. Lucas quickly took off his suit jacket, soaked it, and placed it on Ethan's head. Bend over and follow me. His voice was calm and powerful, completely different from his usual shyness. Don't be afraid, we'll go to the second floor. There are windows there. The fire escape should reach. They bent over and moved forward, the burning pain in their throats healing. Just as they reached the stairs, as Lucas stepped forward to check the situation, Adrian's voice suddenly rang out from behind. Les, be careful. Suddenly, a great force pushed Ethan directly out. Behind him, the decorative beams suddenly crashed down. Adrian was about to exclaim in shock. He quickly crawled over, wanting to move the scalding wood away, but recoiled from the heat. Don't worry about me. The fire truck is here. Go quickly. Adrian's face twisted in pain, but he still tried to smile at him. He covered his mouth and nose with his coat, choking and coughing. He felt his consciousness begin to blur, as if someone was constantly calling his name. When Ethan opened his eyes again, he was in the hospital. Xiaoyu, how are you? Lucas asked anxiously. Ethan shook his head, indicating that he was fine, but his throat was burning with pain. The doctor said that he had inhaled a lot of smoke, but fortunately, he didn't have severe burns and would recover after a few days of rest. Jiang suddenly sat up. What about Adrian? How is he? Lucas hesitated before speaking. He has severe burns on his legs. And I'm afraid that he will. Jiang pulled out the 4-tube and stumbled to Adrian's ward. At this moment, he was already awake, staring blankly at the ceiling. Why did you save me? Hearing Ethan's voice, Adrian came back to his senses and forced a smile. I didn't want you to get hurt. Ethan felt complicated, but the doctor said you'll never be able to stand up again. Adrian lowered his eyes, concealing the disappointment in them. It doesn't matter, just consider it my atonement. There is no true empathy in this world. If I hadn't experienced such pain, how would I be qualified to beg for your forgiveness? Ethan felt a stinging in his eyes, and his vision blurred. Tell you what, you listen carefully, we're even. Hearing this, the man on the hospital bed trembled slightly. He closed his eyes and breathed a long sigh, as if he had unloaded a burden he had carried for many years. When he opened his eyes again, his eyes were filled with relief and reluctance. I understand, he said softly, his voice weary. I'm so tired, I want to rest. Ethan nodded and left the ward, not disturbing him any further. Lucas had been standing quietly at the corner of the corridor, and immediately stepped forward when he saw him come out. His white shirt was covered in smoke and scorch marks, and his tie hung loosely, making him look disheveled yet warm. Senior Ethan suddenly laughed, pointing to his burnt cuff. You should go back and change your clothes, it's all charred. Lucas was taken aback for a moment, then looked down at his disheveled appearance, scratching his head a little embarrassed. It really is a mess. Then I'll go back first. My phone number is on the business card. I'll be there whenever you need me. In the following days, Ethan wanted to see Adrian, but was always turned away. He thought Adrian couldn't accept his disability, so he didn't bother him anymore and focused on preparing for his law firm. On the day of the law firm robbery, Adrian sent a congratulatory gift, a transfer of shares. Adrian transferred all of his assets to him, but when he went to the hospital room to find him, it was empty. He had already been discharged. Adrian disappeared. He called off the engagement, withdrew from the family business, and even the Jiang family didn't know where he had gone. The only thing he left for Ethan was an email. Little fish, by the time you see this email, I will have left the universe. I'm glad you can forgive me. That's enough for me, but my crippled body can no longer be with you. Don't look for me and don't feel guilty. It's all my own fault. I hope you can find someone who is your equal. If not, that's okay too. You deserve the best of everything. And I love you, not because of anything else, but just because you are Ethan. Tears blurred on the keyboard. Ethan knew that his story with Adrian had completely ended here. 3 years later, Ethan's name resounded throughout the legal world. Lucas always stood where he could see him, silently guarding him, accepting the coffee he handed over, but never accepting the ring, because he knew that there were more important answers in life than love. The end. Alright. That's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. We'll keep updating with more exciting stories, and we look forward to seeing you next time.